Oh my gosh, I'm being taped. Well, so I'm making bread, and this is an antique 6-burner wood cook stove that was made up in Troy, New York. It's a Fuller and Warren company. It's called a Capital Stewart stove, and it has a grate that you can burn coal or wood. We burn wood, and Leanne can talk to you about the wood, but the amount of work it takes to cut it in short lengths.
It's a small firebox, mostly designed that way for coal. So all of the wood is 12 to 14 inches, real small. And they made a lot of ornate wood and coal stoves. This one has a water jacket, which we don't use.
Is it rusted?
People heated their bath water and stuff in these tanks.
Yeah, because imagine in those days there was no running hot water. So you put your water in here in the woods, because this was probably the center of the house, right? You could cook on it, and it heated your little one-room house. And then you took the hot water out of there, put it in a basin, and took a bath. Can you imagine? Yeah, different sound.
And it has a pretty nice oven. You have to watch it because it'll get too hot on the inside, so sometimes you have to turn what you're cooking around so that it cooks evenly. And anyway, it's an antique that still works really well.
And it heats the downstairs of the house pretty well.
Yeah, it feels great.
And it's shiny right here because of people doing this.
It's true.
That's why this edge of the stove is shiny and the rest of it isn't, is you tend to just want to be next to that warmth. So we're happy to have this thing, even though it's not a modern airtight wood stove. It's not real efficient as far as heat goes, but we don't care. It's beautiful.
Yeah, we love it. And I've moved, this came out of the basement of the Falls Village Congregational Church about, I think, 40 years ago. And was in the original cabin I lived in down the road here. Then we moved it up to the big house. And then we've been in this house 11 years, and we moved it up here.
The stove came from the congregation?
It came from the Falls Village Congregational Church, and apparently it had a broken leg that needed to be welded. They were going to throw it out, I think. So that's how we got it. And you know, I love it. I've cooked on it since I was 23 years old, and I'm 63 now. So.
You don't look like you're 63.
Yeah, I'm 63.
My God, you look like you're about 35 or 40.
Oh, wow. I'll put that in the video.
Yeah.
It's cute, yeah. But so right now I'm making bread, and I've been making my own bread for 40 years. And this is how I start. I start with about, I don't measure now, but it's probably about 2.5 cups of water. And I melt the butter. It's 1 stick of butter that I melt in the water. And in a minute, as soon as the butter is melted, I add about a cup of rolled oats. And this recipe came from originally, and this is a really famous cookbook in Falls Village that people should know about. This is Friends of the Falls Village Daycare Cookbook. And this is, gosh, how old is this now? Oh my gosh, this has to be 30 years old. I don't think you can get copies of this anymore, but
In the library, probably.
what makes it so cool, oh, 1989. What makes it so cool is that all local people have put their favorite recipes in here. I've had it all these years. That's a great cookbook. Let's see if this might be ready now. Yeah. Now I'm just adding the rolled oats. These are organic rolled oats. So we're members of the Berkshire Co-op up in Great Barrington. It's a fabulous co-op where we get almost all of our food. And I try to only buy organic. And this is organic cane sugar. Or do you want maple syrup or sugar in it, honey?
It doesn't matter.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll put maple syrup in. So I'm over here to get the maple syrup. This makes the best bread, I think, is maple syrup. So.
Is that local maple syrup?
It is. This came from the co-op. It's Blue Heron Farm certified organic pure maple syrup.
Uh-huh.
We made our own last year out on the gas
Barbecue.
He bought a great pan, and he boiled down the sap.
So that was really fun.
Yeah, that was fun. All right, so before I add anything cold to this, I'm just going to make sure that the oats have set for a few seconds and soften. Basically, you can make, all you need to make a yeast-risen bread is water, yeast, and flour. You know, that's the simplest bread if you want something without any flavor. Of course, I add maple syrup and salt, so it tastes a little bit better. And we eat it every morning. We have a slice of toast with almond butter and strawberries on top. You know, it's good. So it's great. So we just have to let that sit for just a minute. We have to wait for the oats to soften. So this is my daughter, Chrissy Hewitt. This is, she lives in North Carolina, and she works at Wake Forest University. So I sent her down, this is Tucker, I sent him down here for 1 year to be trained by her, because he was pretty much untrained. And she trained him. The oats are soft now. All right. So this is a bowl. My son Chet is also a potter, and he made this bowl in high school. I have several of his pieces here. But he does it as a hobby. All right, so this is one of his bowls. So I say Chet's not here with me in person, but he's here with me in spirit with his bowl, because I miss my kids, I really do. So this is too hot, to put the yeast in. If you put yeast in at this temperature, it kills the yeast. As you know, yeast is between, it's not a fungi, it's not a bacteria, it's different. It's yeast, and it grows, and that's what makes the bread rise, of course. It's not actually Red Star active yeast. I have bulk yeast in my freezer, and I just use this jar to store it in the refrigerator. You have to keep it in the refrigerator. So to make 4 or 5 loaves of bread, which is what this is going to make eventually, you use a tablespoon of yeast. And again, this recipe is in that cookbook, if anybody's interested. So right now, of course, this is too hot to put the yeast in, so I'm going to cool it down. And one of the ways you can cool it down is to put in a cup of cold maple syrup. Because I have to get it to the right temperature before I can put the yeast in. So this is going to help. Because, this is cold. This is what temperature, 45 degrees in the refrigerator. And we got to put some salt in, right? We want it to taste. Let's see. So for this many loaves of bread, it's a tablespoon of salt. This is bulk salt that we get up at the co-op. So this is still a little warm. I think the temperature is supposed to be about 110 to put yeast in. If it's much hotter than that, it kills the yeast. Okay, so we have our butter. Of course, you don't have to use butter if you want it to be fat-free. We've got our oats, which are nice and soft, a tablespoon of salt, and a cup of maple syrup. If you don't want sugar, you don't have to add it, of course. So what I might do is add a little cold water here to get to the right temperature. So since Leon's not working in the winter, we have fun with our birds out here.
Well, we have a lot of juncos and nuthatches and chickadees and the little wild finches.
Oh yeah, here are the finches at the bird feeder now.
Yeah.
Oh, they're going to fly away. Yeah. Oh well.
And about a dozen blue jays. And we have pine grosbeaks.
So here's a tablespoon of yeast. And you sprinkle it on top. So now you just have to wait about 8 to 10 minutes for the yeast to rise, because if you don't have yeast, you won't have risen bread, right?
Right.
I made that mistake, let me tell you. If the water's too hot or the yeast isn't good, the yeast is too old. So if you have to make sure that, now what's going to happen is you should see what this looks like now, and then in about 5 to 8 minutes this is going to bubble up, and then we'll know what it looks like. And this is an important part of bread making. I think that people say to me, oh, it's so hard to make bread. Well, to me it's easy to make bread, but I guess you have to have the critical factors here working right? And one is to have the yeast to bubble up. Let's see, I can entertain you showing you this over here. So this is a quilt of Chrissy's ribbons, and her first one
Oh my
was
God.
from Mount Bushnell Horse Farm. So that was the first ribbon she ever won. I think she was 4 or 5. And these are all the different, some of her ribbons, not all of them. When she was 21, I sewed this into a quilt for her and gave it to her for her birthday. Yeah, really fun. Yeah, we've had a lot of fun doing that. Yeah, we've really enjoyed horseback riding. I took her pretty much every weekend. We went to all the local shows. I took her up to the Big E. And then, of course, when she went to Mount Holyoke College, she was accepted up there early decision. She wouldn't go any place that didn't have horses, you know. So we went there, and of course Mount Holyoke is known for the best riding program in the United States. So she was accepted there, early decision. She did very well. She ended up being the captain of the team. And these are the ribbons that she won in college. So we had a lot of fun every weekend going to shows. You know, I didn't have much money, so I had an old Suburban and an old trailer, and we were always the oldest rig in the lot, but it didn't matter. You know, she always won the ribbons. It was fun. So these are my children when Chet was born in 1980, Chrissy 1984. This is a sweater I made for Chet. This is a dress I made for Chrissy. I love my children. They were fun to raise. So this is an antique harness. I'm not sure it's an antique, but this is a 4-harness floor loom. And it's basically what people refer to as a rug loom. And what our New England Puritan ancestors did, you know, they would take their clothes and cut them into strips. And because they didn't want to waste anything, they wove them into a rug. And depending on how you thread the heddles, will determine what your pattern is in your weave. And this has been threaded 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is a basic. This is a very basic weave. And what happens is when you run the heddles down here, I can show you here in a minute what this does. So the biggest job of getting anything like this to happen is the most work is threading, is making, this is called a warp. This is a cotton warp, and the hardest thing is to make the warp. You have to do it on a warping board because it's, I think I've got about 10 yards of warp on here. So you have to, it's a warping board. It's, I don't have that here in this room, but I could show you that at some point. And so you make the warp, and then you get it. It takes 2 people pretty much to get it onto the loom. And my friend Jean Bronson is the person who pretty much taught me how to weave, and we used to get together every Tuesday night and do this. And then this loom came from a friend of mine. I bought it from her. And so you see, this is just a classic loom. When you work the petals here, it just changes, and this is called the shed. And when you change the shed, see, now I've just been here, so what you do is you change it, and now you've crossed the threads, so you can put your next, I'll show you. And I was saying to Jean last time I saw her, we should get together again and start doing this. And then you, this is called beading. The other thing I have over here is this wheel, and this tightens it. So this is tightens your whole project, so it makes a tighter weave. So you take this like this, and you just, it's pretty simple. You know what I loved about this is that if you lose power and you can't watch, you can't have any electronics, you can still weave, which I think is so cool. So you just, oh, and I should tell you that these are the racks that this is important because if you came here at the end of March, these would be full of pots because I have over 100 dahlias in the basement. And I start the dahlias at the end of March and plant them at the end of May. And then I have dahlia blooms in June as opposed to the end of August. Oh wow, this is a good yeast. Not gonna have any trouble with bread rising here. Look at that. Now that's yeast. See, now we know the yeast is going to work. All right, so now you can put in a combination of anything that you want. So I use cornmeal, a little bit of cornmeal. Sorry, I'm not measuring. You can. A little bit of cornmeal. And you put in a variety of grains just to add to the nutrition, I think. And mostly I always use organic white flour. Sometimes I buy it in bulk. And this is whole wheat, a little bit of whole wheat. Whole wheat makes it very heavy, so you got to be careful of the amount of whole wheat. You can make an all whole wheat bread, but it's going to be pretty heavy. So then you just whisk it in. So now you know your yeast is working, so you can't really wreck this bread. It's going to rise. And people will say to me, I tried to make bread and it didn't work. And I'm like, gosh, I don't know. This is time consuming, as you can see. But while it's rising, you get to go around and do other things, like clean the barn. And I'm a nurse practitioner, and I drive 40 minutes to work every day. I work in Dover Plains, New York at Hudson River Healthcare. And so when I'm home, I love to stay home. So what I'm waiting for is a dough that's elastic, and I'm going to show you what that means. You can follow the recipe, and I think the recipe will say 6 to 8 cups of flour, but I don't do that. I just guess I kind of know now how much flour goes in here. So when I'm driving to work, I either listen to my, educational tapes for work, or I listen to books on tape, which I love.
Cool.
I love books on tape. I've listened to, I love that Canaan Library, and I sometimes go to the library in Falls Village, but what happens is I work Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Wednesday I work with my friend, Marcia Kaufman, who's a garden designer.
Oh.
Do you know Marcia?
I know her, yeah.
You do know her.
Met her at the flower farm.
That's right. Well, Marcia and I have known each other for a long time, and she actually came into the office, and of course she won't mind me saying this. And so first she started out as my patient, and then we got talking about gardens. And she came up here and she saw my garden, and she said, "Gloria, you have to work with me." And I said, "Well, I don't really need another job," but so every Wednesday I started working with Marcia as the gardener. And so we started out pretty busy with several gardens on Wednesday, but she's 64 this year. Yeah, she's the same age. She's 64 this year. She's starting to slow down a little bit. So we have one big garden that we do over in Salisbury. So in the summer, starting with the garden season, we garden every Wednesday morning. And then as soon as the garden season is over, we become Wednesday girls. And Wednesday girls are, first we go swim at the pool in Canaan. Then we go into that cute little railroad cafe there. And then eat all the calories we just burned up. And then and then we go to the Canaan Library because the Douglas Library is open in the morning, whereas the Falls Village Library doesn't open until 2 on Wednesdays. So we're the Wednesday girls, and we go to the library, and that's where I get all those great books on tape. And they really save me, because when you're driving the same route every day for 40 minutes, as you can understand, it's really great to have those books on tape.
May I ask, as a nurse practitioner, how many patients you see a day?
20.
20.
16 to 20. It's a lot.
That's a lot.
I'm pretty busy.
Yeah.
And I've been there 15, almost 16 years now. So, just about 16 years. And before that, I was a nurse at Sharon Hospital, and I worked in the emergency room, recovery room, OB, labor and delivery. I worked in labor and delivery about 10 years. And so I know everybody. I know everybody. I know all the doctors. I know all the patients. And so when I got this job as a nurse practitioner, I wanted to work locally. And I got the job originally with Dr. Dweck and Amenia at Hudson River Healthcare. At that time, it was Foothills. It wasn't Hudson River Healthcare. And then Hudson River Healthcare bought them out. We're a federally funded community health center, and there's 32 offices like ours now. And Amenia is one, Dover Plains is another. There's one in Pine Plains, Hudson, Peekskill, Walgreens. They're all over. I couldn't even name. There's 32 offices. So anyway, I started in the Amenia office, and then we kept losing doctors down in Dover. Dover has a challenging population, and so that's where I've been. So now I'm kneading the bread, and the reason you knead the bread is to make the gluten hold it together. Whereas you knead the bread, the gluten, and you'll see in a minute what happens here. So it started out as a blob.
Yeah.
And you're kneading it, so you roll it over and push it. And when I was 12 or 13, I was raised in Canaan with 5 brothers and sisters. My cousin, Danny Van Arsdale from California, came to the house with his hippie girlfriend. I'm telling you, this is the truth. And she came in and she said, "Let's make bread." And that's the first time, because my mother never did this, and that's the first time I saw anybody make bread, and I was fascinated with it. It was so much fun. And I started doing this when I was 23, and I'm 63. 64. So you see how it's starting to get a little elastic?
Yeah.
So when you push it, it comes back. And in the book, it will tell you, when you read about making bread, this is what they mean when they say elastic. See how it kind of has a little bit of give and it comes back, the shape comes back. See that? Do you see how it's doing it?
Yeah.
And this, and the yeast and the gluten is what makes it do that. And if you didn't have the yeast in here, it wouldn't do it. So that's the difference between risen bread and flat bread. So this is great for your upper body strength.
Yeah.
I also say it's really good if you're frustrated and you can just punch the dough. So if you're having a bad day, you can punch the dough. Right? Of course, that's not politically correct. Okay. So now, here's your bread. Now it takes about an hour for this to rise. And so the books will tell you to clean out your bowl and oil the bowl so the bread can rise. Well, you don't have to do that. But you do have to cover it with a damp cloth. So I used table napkins, or I forget if this was an old dish. I don't know if this has been in there. It's clean, so you wet it and you wring it out and you put it over.
And what does that do?
This keeps the
Moisture in?
it keeps the bread from getting hard on top, so it will rise. So then the next thing you want is a nice warm place to make it rise. This is a little too hot. So then what I would do here is, and if you put it on a surface that's too hot, like this is pretty hot, I can barely touch this, the bottom of the bread will start to cook. So you don't want that. So you put it up like this. Or, this is a pretty hot stove today, so this is pretty hot, I wouldn't put it here. Too hot here too. So this is what you do. You put it up here and you let it rise. It's just so that at the bottom of the bowl doesn't burn. See, and here's the temperature in this oven. Is pretty hot right now. It's, what is it up to? 300. No. Actually, the thermometer's a little off. My guess would be it's more like 400 inside there. Did you see the inside of the oven?
Yeah.
I think you saw that before.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And do you see, in order to see how it works, is so if you push this forward, there's a flow in here. If you push this forward, then the heat goes up the chimney. Now watch this thing. See, it's going up the chimney, and here's the flow. See how it closes that? And the heat then goes around this, goes around the oven, circulates around the oven.
Amazing.
Pretty cool, really.
Yeah.
Very heavy. It was quite a project moving this in here. But it's here now, so
Good.
that's great. Good. So now we have to wait about an hour for this to rise a little bit.
All right.
And if you wanted to go outside or not, or...
Sure.
Ponies! Hello, ponies! I don't want you to fall. Be careful.
Okay.
Hello! Dolly! Of course, she's going to come first because she likes to eat. Hello, Dolly! Here's the most famous one, right here. The best one of the bunch. Dolly! She's so good. Oh, don't, gosh, you're right on the ice now.
I know.
This is a classic Palomino quarter horse. She's registered. She's registrable with the Palomino Association and with the Quarter Horse Association.
Hi, can I pet her?
Oh, sure. No, she won't do anything. Oh, here comes a bad boy. Here's a bad boy. Now this one will bite you.
Oh, I don't want to be bitten.
Yeah, he won't really, as long as I feed him.
Okay.
This is her big show horse. He's actually 16 too. This is a big horse. He's retired now, and Mom takes care of him. I'll put that on the record for the... God, don't fall
I'm
on
all
this
right.
ice here.
I'm fine.
And they've all been rolling in the mud.
They're filthy dirty, rolling in the mud. That's okay. They're horses. Now here's the baby coming. He's the new kid on the block, so he's more timid, and he knows that they're going to chase him. In a minute, you'll probably get to see that. Leon, you know what? If you feed him over there, Craig didn't come to the fence. Leon, what these are not for you.
Oh, what do you think? You think you never ate before? Yeah. What do you think? You guys are so spoiled. Be careful.
Yeah.
Come on, baby. I'll keep the other ones over here. You're all right. There's the baby. He's coming 6 this year. He's very good. He goes out on the trail. He's very safe. Oh my gosh, they're eating these like crazy. He must be good. So, you know, every 8 weeks you gotta have their feet done. Blacksmith has to come. That's Tucker over there.
Hi, Tucker.
That's a story. Oh my gosh, you think they never ate. And look at, they have that whole bale barn full of hay there. Isn't that bale barn a neat invention? I love it. All right, okay guys. Okay. Yeah, okay, what? This must taste good. They're really liking these. You want to give more to the baby?
You don't eat
All
those.
right, okay. Oh, what? Oh my gosh, you're so cute. This one is just, I don't know, if he was human, he'd be on psych meds.
Really?
Oh, he's bad, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Chrissy can ride him. See how bad he is? He's going to bite her. Chrissy can ride him, but nobody else can. He'll crow hop and buck. And she won ribbons on him. I don't know how she did. I'll tell you, I don't think, this girl, I don't know, I've never seen any more dedicated rider than Chrissy when it came to this horse. She worked so hard with him. And on January 11th, when she was 16 years old, he got caught in a gate, and stop, Leo, and got his leg torn up. Dave Sandifer wanted to put him down.
Oh,
So, of course, Chrissy's hysterical.
sure.
If you get up, I could show you, but you can't really see it. You can kind of see the scar right there. So he ripped the skin all off his leg. It was hanging down around his knee.
Uh-huh.
Dave Sandifer came and said, put him down. Chrissy cried. So, of course, we shoved him on the back. We had tranquilized him. Took 6 of us to add tranquilize to push him on the back of the trailer. We trailered him over to, never forget this, Millbrook, New York, to Millbrook Equine. Mitch Ferraro, the vet over there, put 200 staples and 200 stitches in his leg and underneath. You can see it in the summer when he doesn't have long hair. And he came home, and we had to stand up on cross ties for 6 weeks. Couldn't lay down. And Chrissy slept out in the barn with him. She got a color TV and put it in front of him so he'd have something to look at. She dressed that wound every day. He would have died if it wasn't for her care. And she got up and won the public speaking contest at Housatonic Valley Regional High School when she was a junior, talking about this horse. And how she cared for him. And she got special permission to come home at noontime and check on him. And he made it. And that happened on January 11th. And that August 2nd, she took him down to the Washington Horse Show and won the Washington Hunter on him. So how's that for a story? Dolly, yes. What do you think? Look at this, is a great picture. You're going to send me if there's any good pictures. Hi. What do you say, beautiful girl? Want to go back in now? Are you ready?
It's up to you. See how the bread is doing.
That's because it's nice and warm in here.
Beautiful. This is head base.
All right, let's wash my hands here. All right, let's see how I'm doing with my bread here. Wow.
So,
Perfect.
Perfect, right?
It is perfecto. Then you do what's called punching down. That's to get the air out. Now the purpose for the kneading at this point is to get the air out so you don't have bread that has big giant holes in it. Isn't that perfect?
that.
Yeah.
Alright, here we go. We just gotta keep an eye on it. Here you
That's the
go.
way it's supposed to look.
Oh, yeah.
More wood?
Let's see, how's our temperature? Okay. Good. Oh yes, I need more wood. Wow, look how fast that burned down.
Yeah, very
Gosh. This is what we do all winter, feed the stove.
Uh-huh. That's nice.
Yeah, you can see how hot it went up like 100 degrees. That's what happens. Generally, I'm paying more to it came out perfect. Huh?
Yes. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Wow, it smells
It
good.
smells good. This home on the Undermountain Road showcases some of Leon Harris's stonework. Let's join him as he builds a wall with his two helpers. First, they must excavate the footing.
Driveway and grab it and throw it in here.
Siempre don Jorge donde puso la marca ya. ¿Sí? Like that.
Yeah, how many? All right, come downhill a little bit more.
Where's that?
All right.
I'll let you.
I'll start off.
Okay.
In 1979, I joined the United States Agency for International Development and went to Washington. Found a place to stay and looked for a church. The Congregational Church was a long ways away from where I was living, so the next choice was a Methodist church, and I started going there to this Methodist church. And then within a few months, someone said, would you like to sing in the choir? So I did, and then there was this, I was the tenor, and then there was this young lady who was an alto, and the altos were below the tenors. So, in fact, it was Mary Campbell, and I looked at the back of her head for about a year singing in the choir.
You left out the part about the visitor from Connecticut, though.
I don't know, what visitor from Connecticut?
And when you first came to Metropolitan, which was a huge church, a Gothic church there on Ward Circle in Washington, D.C., with a huge sanctuary. You know, Tracy comes from Falls Village, which is much smaller, and you, as you tell the story, you walked into that sanctuary and thought, well, this is much too big. Everything's happening about a half a mile away. But there was a visitor card that you were to fill out and put in the offering plate. And during the last hymn, the ushers would tabulate where the visitors came from. So at the end of the service, the minister says, we would like to welcome our visitor from Connecticut. There was only one. And Tracy said, oh my gosh, she's talking about me. This is not so big after all. And so that was an incentive to keep coming to this church. And that's where we met, singing in the choir.
The Christmas party for the choir in early January 1981, I got up enough nerve and I spoke to her.
Oh my goodness.
And I found out that she was the second of 6 children. This is after a year and a half of observing her. That she was the second of 6 children from a dairy farm in Illinois. I'm the second of 6 children from a dairy farm in Connecticut. And we both had shown animals at the fair and been in 4-H, and so we had a common communication, and within about 3 months we were married, right?
Yeah. So right after you got married, you went to Yemen, both of you together?
Yes, the proposal was to get married and go to Yemen. Well,
Actually, I did that in 2 sentences. I asked her if she would marry me, and then the second sentence was, and go to Yemen.
But I had no idea where Yemen was, or what Yemen was like. I had to go to the library and do some research.
Joke from some British travel log or whatever was something about Yemen was, it was rushing headlong out of the 14th century into the 15th century or something like that. There was almost no education, very few schools. Most of the people dressed in traditional dress and all carried a djembia, which is a curved knife on their belt. You must have seen some of those in pictures, and of course the knife is always there. Now if they draw it, they mean to use it, and so you wouldn't want that. Within the first month that we were there, we were in a hotel. No, or was it we finally had an apartment in September. And there was a lot of rifle firing one night. I had spent a number of years in Vietnam, so I was familiar with hearing ammunition and rifles and so on. And we got out of bed and jumped under the bed, slid under the bed to protect ourselves. And it just kept going on, and I figured that after a while it was pretty clear that it was outgoing, it wasn't incoming. So we went back to bed. Well, the next morning we found out that it was, there had been an eclipse of the moon, So they all went out to fire at it. And of course, it worked. I mean, and then it came back.
I mean, in other posts that we've been to, we could interact with the local people more than we could in Yemen because the language barrier in Yemen was formidable. We knew a little bit of Arabic. We had some Arabic training before we went. So I, at one point in my life, had kitchen and market Arabic. I could go and buy carrots and knew the numbers and the colors and the names of the fruits and vegetables and so forth. But to really interact with the local people was quite difficult.
Yemen was very tribal, and I expect still is quite tribal. And so different sheikhs would control different areas. The control of the central government sometimes didn't go very far beyond the main roads in the capital city. And so when you got stopped at a checkpoint, well, you could usually tell whether it was a government checkpoint or a rebel checkpoint, but you know, they were just looking at your papers or whatever. Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
Well, my role in Yemen, I taught school for a year at Sinai International School, but then gave that up after a year because our first child, John, was on the way. We did a lot of hiking in Yemen. There was it was a mountainous country with a lot of terraced farming and a lot of trails to and from the various villages up on the mountainsides. So we went hiking and, you know, carried John in this baby carrier, and the Yemeni were fascinated at this very fair-skinned, very light-headed American baby. We have some beautiful pictures of the Yemeni relating to John. And then, of course, it was not that long before Joseph was on the way, and before our end of our 5 years, we also had Catherine. Catherine was not born while we were in Yemen. She was on her way, but I came back to, it was the end of our tour in Yemen before Catherine was born.
So when we got ready to leave Yemen, I went around and made calls on the various ministries that I'd worked with. And I remember talking to the Deputy Minister of Agriculture, and he was the one that I'd interacted with most frequently. His name was Muqbil, Ahmed Muqbil. And I told Muqbil that I was leaving, but having been an agricultural officer, I was focused on production activities. And my personal production activity was very successful because I came as a newlywed and was leaving with 2 children and a third one on the way. And oh, he loved that. He loved that.
There were many jokes about sowing your seeds.
He was so
forth.
I mean, he was as proud as I was.
But actually, Yemen is not our only foreign service post. We've been to...
Where did you go after Yemen?
Well, we were back in the States briefly, and then we went to Bamako, Mali, in West Africa.
There was an outbreak of desert locusts.
Desert locusts. The insects?
Every 7 years, you know, the Bible talks about them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're still going on. It was a big deal, a big deal. They can go, they can travel as much as 1,000 miles in a week. And when they start to move, they go in swarms. And I remember in Mauritania, Nouakchott, when they were there, the desert locusts, they stripped all the trees in the ambassador's yard. We had emergency programs to try to take care of that, which was both insecticides and spraying, and they would have to have a contract with the helicopters to spray and so on. We had a project called the Grasshopper Action Program or something like that. And so we had the cage in the office with some desert locusts. No, it was a grasshopper. No, it was the Adelia senegalensis, the grasshopper. That they were also. Anyway, we took to them home, and that was the first pets that our boys had. We made cages. Each had a grasshopper. That lasted for about a year, right? Until one of them forgot to bring enough leaves for the grass. Do you remember those?
I don't remember the grasshoppers as much as I remember Chester and Mindy.
Oh my gosh. Oh gosh.
Tracy's mother, Laura Atwood, wanted to come and visit the grandchildren for one Christmas when we were in Bamako. This was a major trip for her, but she persevered and came. And she, was the kind of grandmother who would have been content to stay in the house and play with the children. And she even asked me if there was some mending she could do. But we took her to a village just so she could see a bit of African life. We took her to our cook's village. We had a cook who was Malian but spoke French and was a very nice young man. And he invited us to go out to his village. And the chief of the village gave her as a gift a hen. And
it was a rooster first.
Well, the rooster was first. I forget which came first, the hen or the rooster. But, all right, a rooster came first. So a week or so later...
The whole idea was, this was the best that they could do. And it was a very poor village. I mean, I remember the house was mud house. And about all they had in there was a cooking pot. And maybe one or two shirts hung on a nail. It was very poor. But they, a real gift.
American visitors, this is a real honor to them.
So the idea was, of course, they were giving us something that could be meat, sustenance. Well, we have 3 young children with us, and by the time we got back to Bamako, they'd already named the rooster Chester.
And if Chester's got a name, Chester's not going to end up in the pot.
So, all right, so then Mary's mother...
So then a few weeks later, my mother came to visit us in Bamako. But we went to the same village and they presented her with a hen. And on the way home, the hen is named Mindy. And so we have Chester and Mindy walking around in our compound, our enclosed backyard, and...
Well, Mindy, of course, laid eggs, and Chester did his business and so on. And at one point, we had 17 fowl running around.
We had quite a poultry project going just there in the backyard.
Well, finally, the landlord said, because he was a retired medical doctor who had worked in France, he was Malian, but he said, that's not very sanitary, having all these fowl running around, the yard, and I don't want that, and in fact, if you don't move them, I'm going to cancel the lease, and so on. All right, sir, all right. So we gave away the various chickens and so on, and to friends and neighbors and so on. But there was Chester. So we took Chester back to the village where he had come from. Well, they couldn't believe it. Because, of course, when Chester left the village, he was, like the village folks, pretty emaciated and not much meat on his bones and so on. And when he came back, he was a big plump rooster. I'm not sure what happened to Chester, but I can just imagine.
Yeah.
What else happened in Mali when we were there?
Well, we were there for the coup.
Yes. Musa Khalifa Traore, who had been the president of Mali since independence in '68, folks were, well, he was always elected every time there was an election, but there was only one political party and, of course, only one candidate. And it just was a question of whether he got 98 or 93% of the vote. And the people thought it would be time for a change, and they began demonstrating.
I mean, some of the markets that we had frequented were looted and burned, and it was quite a disruptive time. And the school was closed for a month or so.
And then you went to Kyrgyzstan.
Kyrgyzstan, yes. in Central
Well, we were in
Asia.
Washington for quite a stint, and then we did go to Kyrgyzstan, yeah.
We spent a long time in Washington because I wanted the children to have all the sports teams and the music lessons and the Boy Scouts and things that aren't as well developed overseas as they might be. So we were in Washington, D.C. for most of their elementary years, and they went to the Washington Waldorf School, and I taught at the Waldorf School. But then when they were teenagers, we went to Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan. Kyrgyzstan was, I think, the best of our 3 Foreign Service posts. Being there with the children really helped us to meet the local people. We did far more interaction with the Russians and the Kyrgyz than we did certainly in Yemen and even in Mali. It was difficult to really befriend the local people. You knew your household help and so forth, but we began studying Russian as soon as we knew that this assignment was happening. I got a book of Russian phrases and so forth, and we began to learn some of the language, and the children did very well in the languages the whole time we were there.
The children decided to hike to the glacier. There's a national park about 30 miles outside of Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan, Larcha, and you can go up to, there is a hut way up on the glacier. I don't know, it's probably 11 or 12,000 feet. It's, starting at maybe 5,000 or something. It's a long ways up, and it's not really a trail. It's just kind of, you go over rocks and scree and whatever. But the children wanted to do this, and so there's John, Joseph, and Catherine, and then their friend Medina. And so it was just after New Year's, right?
In January, yes.
So go ahead, Mary, tell the story.
Well, it's your story, you tell.
Well, they were going to do this, and they knew the route and so on, or had heard about it and so on from others, and they prepared, all right, and?
Well, they prepared, and it was a fairly mild January, so, we took them out there and hiked a little ways with them on the trail, and they took off, and all the time I'm thinking, well, just how cold does it get out here at night on these mountains? But, they'll be all right because they have a tent. And even though it's only a 2-person tent or something, they can all squeeze in this tent. And even if they can't get the tent pitched because it's too rocky, the windbreak of the nylon will protect them, and they'll have each other, and they're all Eagle Scouts and good kids. They'll be fine. And then we got home, and there on the floor of the bedroom is the tent. And then
They forgot to
they
take
did
the
not.
tent.
They decided not to take the tent. That they would make it to the hut.
We were really worried, and so I got a video from the video library at the embassy. And what was it that we started?
Well, he said, let's take the mind off the situation. Let's watch a video. So he puts on The Perfect Storm. This is where all things come together, and these fishermen are out on the water. And I mean, this was not the movie to be watching in that situation.
We didn't watch the whole thing. We just couldn't. We were too worried.
It was too worried. But Friday night we worried, and all day Saturday we hadn't heard otherwise, so we assumed they got to the hut and they were fine. And Sunday we drove out there and we hiked up the trail, and sure enough, here they came, singing songs. So we had a wonderful time. Their peanut butter froze.
They cooked some sort of noodles the first night, and it burned. And so, of course, they had to have this little stove to heat the snow in order to make water. And apparently they said heating the snow in the pot that had the burned noodles on the bottom, they said, was the worst water they'd ever had.
But they were fine. They had a good experience, and it all turned out well. What I remember about Kyrgyzstan is the interaction that we had with the local people. I mean, Catherine wanted to learn Kyrgyz, and so we found a young woman to teach her Kyrgyz. And this young woman, Nazgul, and her husband, Jumabai, invited us to their village, and we experienced the traditional company or holiday meal of the Kyrgyz. They slaughter a sheep and make what is called beshparmak, which is basically homemade noodles and mutton cooked together. And
They serve the head of the sheep.
They serve the head of the sheep, and you as the oxicol, the oldest male guest at this party, received the fat tail of the sheep. Is that right?
Yes. It was like, and as the honored guest, the elder male, respect. And so you get the important part of the sheep. Well, in that part of the country was the fat tail. The fat tail was like eating straight lard. I had 5 or 6 spoonfuls, maybe as many as 8 or 9, but then even the vodka didn't cut it.
There are many aspects of the Kyrgyz cuisine that were a real challenge to Americans. When they slaughter the sheep, every part is used. They make the intestines into sausage and so forth, and then the next morning for breakfast we had what Joseph called gut soup. It's very difficult to get some of these things down until you get used to them. You can acquire a taste for anything. And of course, another way they show their hospitality is when your plate is empty, they fill it up again. If your bowl of hummus is empty, they fill it up again. You work hard to get this down, and the result is it's full again. But we had wonderful experiences in Kyrgyz homes.
So, in many ways, Eric, I would say that we were very lucky because we had an overseas experience in developing countries, and yet we knew that home was Falls Village. All right, always had a place to come back to, and it was basically in that overseas experience where we raised our grade school and teenage children. So in their formative years, they were into other cultures.
Hello, hello, hello.
Everybody, how you doing? Oh!
Oh, yeah, I'll walk away from the parking meter.
That's right. Right here.
So we got everything.
Eric, you're making me buy this today.
The most popular things are the verticals. Hi, gals.
This is one of my favorites. This is South Glastonbury cider mill. I love this picture. I just love the orange.
Yeah.
You been to Glastonbury?
No.
Great town. There's the downtown.
Show me what you have of Falls Village.
Okay. All these. Okay, we got the inn. There's the library. Here's Falls Village in winter. Here's the church. The old church. Here's the fire department. The old fire department. Here's the high school. That one goes for a lot of gifts.
Uh-huh.
Here's the falls.
Great.
Anyway.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Merry Christmas.
Good to see you.
Upside down, Denny.
Oh, Terry.
All ye faithful, joyful and triumphant, O come ye to Bethlehem. Come and behold him, born the King of angels. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him, Christ the Lord. Deck the halls with boughs of holly. jolly, fa la 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 la. 'Tis the season to be jolly, fa la 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 la. Don we now our gay apparel, fa la 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 la. Troll the ancient Yuletide carol, fa la 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 la. Good tidings we bring to you and your king. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. On your knees, all hear the angel voices. O night divine, O night when Christ was born. O night divine, O night divine. The angels did say, was it certain for shepherds in fields as they lay, in fields as they lay keeping their sheep on a cold winter's night that was so deep.
I'm going to have two heads. That's a different.
Merry Christmas, everyone. Merry Christmas.
And so we hear the same story again of Jesus' birth as part of keeping our Christmas tradition, but also to remind us that no amount of passing years will ever change Jesus' purpose for coming into the world. He came to give hope, peace, joy, and love to anyone who would receive him into his or her life. Jesus' reason for coming into the world should be very comforting for us these days, for we are living in a world surrounded by events that aren't all that comforting. In this season of giving and receiving, let us remember that the greatest gift is nothing that we're going to take away from the Christmas tree, all beautifully wrapped. Instead, it is going to be the opening wider of our hearts to receive those gifts that Jesus offers. Hope, peace, joy, and love.
This night shine in your hearts and in your lives. Enjoy, for Christ has come to give us a new world. Amen. We now might greet one another with Christmas wishes.